Hello, 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 and welcome to Gritty Reboot. Today we are going to be doing something a little bit different from our normal format. We are going to be talking about the films of Nicolas Cage. Why did we make this decision, Meredith?
Because we love Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I suppose that we do. Now, we picked two movies out of his catalog.
Yeah. We picked one that's one of his more popular additions to his career, which is Face Off. And then you picked something a little different.
So I guess let's not waste any time. Let's get right into talking about Face Off.
I've been chasing this guy ever since I joined the force. He has no conscience, and he shows no remorse. He's the mastermind behind numerous bombings and political assassinations. He has a felony list a mile long: murder, arson, kidnapping, terrorism, you name it. He's the most dangerous and brilliant criminal mind I've ever known. For years, I've been watching him, tracking him, studying his every move. I know his every mannerism, every facial tick, gesture. I know him better than he knows himself. And now, after all this time, I finally figured out a way to trap him. I will become him.
So Face Off came out, what, 1996, 97?
97.
1997. I saw this movie with my parents, and I remember really loving it back in the day, and I know my parents really enjoyed it. I don't remember much about the actual experience in the theater, but I know it was a crowd-pleasing film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've liked Face Off probably less and less as I've seen it. I still appreciate it as a bit of a guilty pleasure, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily one of my favorite Woo films that I go back and check out, and sort of the same thing for Cage and Travolta as well.
I don't like John Woo as a director, so I just love this movie. I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's doesn't take itself too seriously.
But I think that's a problem that it has. Like, it does take itself seriously. It does take its time to, like, talk about the pain that's going through Sean Archer and the issues that he has with his wife. And these things come in, and they certainly do help give a little shade to Nicolas Cage's performance, but they kind of slow the movie down, sadly.
Yeah, I guess if you want to look at it that way, I just look at it as a fun romp. It's a fun action movie. It's not supposed to be. I mean, if you started looking at every little thing that's wrong with this movie, you could definitely not have a good time, because there are a lot of things that are wrong with the movie. There's no way in hell somebody could do a face transplant.
Yeah.
You know, like the way that they did.
Yeah.
So I understand that is, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Yeah, you do. And we're not really going to talk about the science of Face Off, because I think that's sort of hustling backwards to talk about how that works. Especially with ridiculous as it, even though the movie, I mean, that does get to a bit of my issue. The movie spends a lot of time trying to get you to kind of believe the science of the movie. And I think that could be time better spent, to be honest. And I think later on, the movie really wants to get you emotionally invested in what's going on in the picture. And I think that is to its detriment. And it kind of just slows things down a little bit. And I think this is a general problem I've seen with a lot of John Woo's work, is that when it gets Americanized, he loses a bit of that kind of madness that he had in Hong Kong, where anything could fly and anything was possible in his movies. And at the end of the day, this is a bit of a pale imitation of it, but it is one of his better American movies by a wide margin.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fan of John Woo's movies. He's very he likes to put a lot of style. It's like the lens flares with what's his face?
Abrams?
Yeah, J.J. Abrams.
Mhm.
Like, it just drives me insane.
Well, Woo's flourishes, they don't necessarily bother me in the movie. Like I said, I just wish it was a bit more like his older fare. It's pretty silly, but I think the film could have been a bit better. But the one thing I think that does certainly hold the movie up are the performances.
Okay, so the movie starts off with John Travolta's son dying, and then we get 6 years later. So we get his son dying, and then we already jumping ahead 6 years. We meet our characters, John Travolta, who plays Sean Archer, and Castor Troy, who's Nicolas Cage plays.
Yeah.
And Nicolas Cage is the one that shoots his son. He's hamming it up as a bad guy through this whole movie, Nicolas Cage, and then through part of John Travolta's performance as well.
Yeah, that is sort of a notable thing about the movie. The Castor Troy character doesn't really change despite who plays him, and that is one thing that the movie had to get right, and it really does.
I think the movie is important that it has its two actors. That it needs two actors that can play off of each other well, and they picked a really good team in Nicolas Cage and John Travolta.
Yeah, you can tell they both really revel in having to play the Castor Troy part. They both had quite a bit of fun with it. And managed, oddly enough, I do believe that Nicolas Cage almost has more fun when he has to play Sean Archer, a much more quiet and reserved character in the same film.
Yeah.
Like he does a really nice job trying to make the later, basically the back half of the second act story work with him trying to reconnect with his wife. I think his performance almost makes that palpable and almost makes it work. But I mean, that's just a testament to Nicolas Cage that you can see him going, crazy as that priest who's feeling up the 15-year-old girl in the choir, and an hour later, he's having a heartfelt scene with Joan Allen as a completely different person.
Yeah.
But that is sort of, what makes Nicolas Cage Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, he's great. And that's why we chose this movie and one other movie of his. We just love Nicolas Cage and we want to pay respects to him for our 25th anniversary episode.
Yeah. So it's our 25th episode. We haven't been doing this 25 years. But it's, we always sort of do that. We try to do something a little bit different every time we get to a 10 or a 5 or something like that. So the 25th, we did something that was a little bit out there. So that's why we're talking about Nic Cage.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. What else do we got to talk about?
Exactly.
Okay. So we do have a great cast. Joan Allen is the wife. What do you think about the cast?
Well, Wu had obviously done pretty well with Broken Arrow a couple years earlier, so he got himself a pretty large budget and put it to use on a very nice cast. It's not just our two leads. Joan Allen is a very accomplished actress. Dominique Swain was an up-and-coming young performer. Didn't really work out for her, but she still had a number of entertaining parts in the 90s. So I think this cast does a really fantastic job.
Wu fought for Joan Allen, actually.
Oh, I can imagine.
They wanted somebody younger.
Yeah, I would assume they probably would have wanted somebody, a little bit more attractive.
Yeah.
And that's something that, Joan Allen's always an incredibly accomplished actress, and I know that's a stigma she's had to fight for a long, long, long portion of her career.
We can obviously tell that the death of his son has destroyed Sean Archer, because he's got a major stick up his ass through part of this very beginning of this movie.
Yeah. He's really thrown into high gear as a grieving father who is just kind of a jerk to everybody.
Yeah. What do you think about the proposal made in this movie of him taking face off of Castor Troy and putting it on his own? Like, that's such a weird request.
Yeah. No, it very, very much is. Like I said, it's one of the things I enjoy is that the movie, the screenwriter spent a lot of time how he was going to talk, discuss this whole theory and this idea of switching faces and provide a very good reason. The script is very high concept in that respect, because you have not just that, but you have like a bomb as well. And like that puts urgency on him having to make the switch. But I really do like, the way Nicolas Cage plays it when he first finds himself as Castor Troy, looking in the mirror, Sean Archer seeing a different face, a face somebody he hates. I do very much enjoy that. But I think one of the elements that I think gets a little bit lost is that the pure hatred that he has for Castor Troy, because once it's done, he's like, well, you take this face and you burn it once this procedure is done. Those are nice little character moments I really like, his undying and burning hatred towards Castor.
Yeah, and I think the feeling's mutual because I think Castor Troy's pretty pissed off when he wakes up and doesn't have a face.
Yeah.
And he finds out the only face that's left is his arch nemesis.
Yeah, and John Woo did a lot of action, but he wasn't always big on gore. So I think the way they did that was actually pretty cool with, you really only get quick glimpses of his face, and then you get a full reveal, but it's in someone's eyeglasses, so you don't really see it full on, because it would be pretty gross. But I think that's another pretty nice scene.
Yeah.
And then the last time we get to see Castor Troy as Nicolas Cage.
We also get a close-up of Joan Allen's ass.
We do when he makes that comment. I hate to see you go, but I love to watch you leave. And
Yeah.
we might get the only cinematic close up on Joan Allen's ass ever. It might be the only one of those.
How do you feel about the composer of this movie? The composer's name is John Powell, and it's his first movie.
Forgettable.
Yeah.
When you said the composer, I was like, I don't have a single note for that because I can't remember any musical sting from this.
He was the pupil to Hans Zimmer.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Or maybe he's done other work than this one, but I can't think of a single note from this movie that stuck out in my mind. That's something the composer wrote. Like right now, I'm really struggling to try to remember any kind of movement or piece from this movie. And I just can't. So whatever it is, it's pretty forgetful.
Would you get a Wilhelm scream?
Oh, it's always nice to get one of those.
Yeah.
I didn't catch where was it?
It's where Dubov pushes the gurney into the guards on the elevator.
Okay.
So it's always fun to recognize a Wilhelm scream.
Yeah, I like to catch those too in all the movies that I watch.
Too bad you don't have an example of that.
No, I didn't put it on.
I don't know if everybody knows what a Wilhelm scream is.
Yeah. I'll edit one in here, but I did not put it in the sound effects, but I showed it. So we always have one of those to indicate when it happens. We always used to take a shot whenever we were watching movies with some friends and we catch a Wilhelm. So like I said, I missed it this time, but then again, sometimes you just sort of tune them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just sort of forget, like, oh yeah, that was a Wilhelm. So
okay, they perform the surgery. Archer, one of my favorite scenes, Archer Troy goes to visit Castor Troy in prison. That's how he knows that he's fucked.
Yeah.
He's utterly and just fucked.
Yeah.
So it's Nicolas Cage kind of playing, or John Travolta playing it out as Castor Troy. It's a good scene.
Yeah. When they do the reveal, because at that point, Sean Archer has completed his mission. He's found out where the bomb is. He tricked his fake brother, and he's just, about to finish this whole thing up, go home and call it a day. And that's when everything goes to shit. He finds himself walking in the room, and we have a whole new second act basically brewing right there. Because a story that becomes about a man switching faces in an undercover story just goes completely by the wayside. And then we get basically a man trying to get his identity back.
Yeah.
So we get a completely different story from this moment on. And then once again, we are reintroduced the fun bad guy character, except played by John Travolta this time.
Yeah.
And who does a really nice job. I think Cage does a better job, but Travolta's no slack in this role. And actually, I think Travolta does a much better job as the more pensive Sean Archer.
Yeah. That's when Castor, not Troy, tries to escape the prison. I called him not Troy in my notes.
That's fine. No, I understand where you're getting at. Yeah.
And then I called Archer Troy. He goes to the cemetery with his wife to see the son. It's another good scene because he's kind of forced to go to the one place he probably doesn't want to be. Or does he even care?
I think the scene does a nice job where it shows you that that's exactly what's going on. Castor, he doesn't want to see the aftermath of the things that he does. He never wants to see the aftermath of anything that ever occurs. So he has to stare at that harsh reality of what he did. And yes, he doesn't care, but that doesn't mean he's not a human.
Yeah.
He can still see another person in pain from something that he did on a whim. He wasn't he wanted to kill Sean. He wanted to kill Sean, but there's probably better ways he could have done it. And he certainly could have waited till his kid wasn't in his hands.
Yeah.
It's a nice sequence because he gets to see that, and you can see how uncomfortable he is and how much he'd rather be anywhere else than at that moment.
The co-screenwriter Mike Werb got the idea for the face surgery from a friend who was in a hand gliding accident.
Yeah.
They had to remove most of the skin on his face to reconstruct the bone underneath. And then they put his face back on.
Yeah.
So that's where this movie comes from.
Yeah, and then he spent a ton of time how can I make this scientific and how can I turn it into an action movie?
Yeah. There was an actual first real life face transplant. It happened in 2012 on Richard Norris, who accidentally shot himself in the face with a shotgun.
Yeah. I actually was aware of this. I actually was aware of this one as well, because I remember how the story made headlines with the real face-off or something like that.
Yeah. 2012, so it didn't happen that long ago.
No, not too long ago. And I think he's okay. I think the face ended up holding.
Nice.
Yeah, because I know they had done something like that before, and basically the face was rejected.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when it's...
Yeah, just like any kind of transplant.
Organ.
So,
Originally, the pair here was supposed to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone.
That would have made for a much better film.
You think so?
Yeah, because I think you would have had two titans of the action film genre together.
I don't think they have the acting chops for it.
Well, no, I mean, but that's never stopped Arnold Schwarzenegger before or anything like that. It would have had to be retooled into a different movie. And that is something that weighed Arnold down later in his career. He wanted to do some more expansive parts, and he just didn't have the acting range to really pull those off. And he would have struggled here, but I think Stallone could have done fine.
Nicolas Cage considers this movie one of the best movies ever made. Seriously. You don't agree with him?
He's made a lot of great movies. I think he's made better action movies than this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think The Rock is a better movie than this.
Con Air.
Con Air is more fun. Con Air knows 100% what it is and never takes time to do anything that it shouldn't be done in a cheesy movie about people, a group of convicts flying through the air and, guards dying. This movie takes all sorts of detours to kind of legitimize itself, and that kind of hurts it a bit. And, Con Air doesn't do those sorts of things. Now, after those movies, I kind of have to search. Maybe National Treasure might be a better movie than this one. I'm not a big fan of those flicks, but I know you are.
Yeah, I really like them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the action in this movie?
He was able to get all those actors to buy into his gun style action and everything like that. And I think this is certainly one of his better American films for that. It's way better than something like Paycheck was a few years later with Ben Affleck and Uma Thurman. And, well, I've actually, I never really thought good Wind Talkers as an action movie since it's a war picture. A really weak one, as a matter of fact. But it does technically have nice action sequences in it. But maybe John Woo doing a war film wasn't the best idea in the world.
No. What do you think about the final showdown? There's a lot of explosions.
There's
action by boat.
Yeah, we get a boat chase in there. And I think the boat chase is actually pretty cool. As far as boat chases go, I do enjoy it. And I like the final stunt of them sort of flying through the air over and over again. Back in a 90s era where you can clearly tell it's not Nicolas Cage and John Travolta flying through the air, where today they would have taken the time to replace the stuntman's head or have the stuntman wear a realistic mask. Yeah,
because the jump off the top of the prison was a 70-foot drop, and it was done by a professional high diver.
That makes sense. I mean, that's one of the things you
70
get.
feet.
One of the things you get in the 90s, people actually doing those kinds of stunts. Yeah. It looks cool. You sort of forget about it every now and then because, that would obviously be done, CG today. I mean, you might get a performer. For the most part, any more difficult effect that could cost like that, it's just a lot easier to just drop a CG guy in.
I always wondered about that because when he falls, he moves his legs back and forth.
Yeah.
Like he's walking.
Yeah.
And then he puts them together to get into the water.
Yeah,
because I wonder if that's like a technique that they teach.
It is. Yeah, you have to put your feet together, and then you're going to form a seal on your face because you don't want the water rushing up your nose as you hit the ground, as you hit the water.
Yeah,
because it'll rush it. Yeah, that apparently can mess you up and almost knock you out. You can get so much water in there, and it's not like Club Dread. You don't have to worry about your asshole. It's my favorite joke in that movie. You have to close your asshole when you jump off so the water doesn't shoot in there. And the girl comes up. She's like, "Oh, my ass!" I guess that lets you know how much I enjoyed Face Off this time. I'm thinking about Club Dread while we're talking about it.
Wow, I can't believe you didn't like it as much.
Well, it's not that I didn't like it. It's just Face Off isn't one of my favorite movies. It's not one of my favorite 90s action movies. I think it's above middle of the road, but I've never really thought of it in the high esteem a lot of people did. The movie got very good reviews when it came out. From critics. I was a bit cold on it then. I just haven't warmed on it over time. Like my nostalgia for it is close to nil.
Oh my God, I love the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool, fun movie, but
if it's on a television, I will watch it.
Yeah,
that's the kind of movie I feel like it is for me. All right, so are you ready to move into our next movie?
6'2" Young is here, baby, and I'ma take care of you.
Thursday started out with a bang. Heat, humidity, moonlight, all the elements in place for a long weekend. I was good at my job. There were periods when my hands moved with the speed and skill beyond me.
How long have you been doing this?
5 years.
Wow, you must have seen some things, huh?
But in the last year, I'd started to lose that control.
I've been seeing the ghosts. You ever notice people who see things are always crazy? Mm-hmm.
I just needed a few slow nights, followed by a couple of days off.
In
There's a double shooting.
Yeah. So I picked Bringing Out the Dead for a couple of reasons. One of which is that it's such a rare thing to find a Scorsese film
You
that
have
is
the
a hidden
power,
gem.
Jesus.
And that's exactly what Bringing Out the
Just a
Dead is.
worthless man.
Because you have a Scorsese movie where nobody really champions this movie. I don't hear people talking about this as their favorite Scorsese film.
No.
You know, and I mean, I hear people defending, like, you know, King of Comedy and things like that. You know, some of the obviously lower tier work from.
I think it's his only work that doesn't have an Oscar nod.
That could be possible, in all honesty, 'cause
Yeah.
almost everything he did got a nomination. But I mean, we're still talking about, you know, Scorsese at the height of his power, you know, in his prime. You know, in the late 90s, he could do pretty much whatever he wanted. He hadn't won an Oscar yet, but that really was not important. It didn't really affect him in either way. It just was a story come Oscar time that he hadn't won one. I mean, everybody knew he was the best there is. You know, that really wasn't up for debate. I listened to an interview he did with Roger Ebert, and he briefly talked about the genesis of this film. And he said that when he had read the novel, all he could think about was Nic Cage's eyes when he read about the lead character. And so that's who he had in mind to play this role, which I think is very interesting because it's not a typical Cage part. It's a bit more subdued. A bit. There's a few Cage moments in it where he raises
He freaks out.
But I mean, they're all within the context of the story. They're not just a character kind of freaking out in a situation. Like, you know, some serious things are going on, or he's just having playful fun.
You just kind of find out little things about his character as you go through this movie.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize he was a drunk until like 3/4 of the way in.
Yeah, when he starts drinking in the.
Well, you get like little hints at it. But then when he actually, it comes out with it, the movie comes out with it, you're like, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
I love those subtle little things that Scorsese's done with this movie.
Yeah. Also, one of the other things to mention is that this is a rare film that features Nicolas Cage where he does not give the strongest performance in this movie. And I think the strongest performance is given by Ving Rhames.
Everybody, that's so funny that you say that, because when I looked through the reviews, for the user reviews, every single person that I had a 1-star review mentioned Ving Rhames. Yeah,
Ving Rhames literally comes on screen for about 15 or 20 minutes and steals the scene.
Yeah.
From Nic Cage, a very difficult thing to do. Does it effortlessly. He's the best character in this movie. He's another paramedic who's been dealing with it a long time, but has found a way to deal with the mental struggles of the job.
Yeah.
And his work with Nic Cage, I mean, that's probably the movie's most electric scene. You know, the movie has real life, and Cage isn't miserable, or his character isn't miserable throughout running with him, you know, which I find interesting as well. Like, he can find some pleasure in what he does with him still.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's just such a strong performance. He just, you know, almost grabs the camera and demands your attention. And somehow, like, Ving Rhames looks older then than he does today.
I know.
Yeah, because you would have thought he was like 50 something, but Ving Rhames was in his 30s at the time.
Weird.
Yeah, he really does. Because the first time I saw it, I thought it was someone older, and I think I remembered somebody far older in my head when I went back to rewatch it, because I don't think I'd watched this movie since maybe 2004, maybe earlier.
1999 is when it came out.
Yeah.
All right, so we meet obviously Frank, the paramedic who's Nicolas Cage is playing. He takes an old guy that it's their first call. They take him to an overcrowded hospital. He meets one of the family members. And that's Patricia Arquette's character.
Yeah. Nic Cage's real wife at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were very, very excited to work together on this project, even though I think they would be divorced less than a year later.
2 years.
Oh, 2 years?
Yeah.
I know they did not last long. And, you know, as I've talked about it again, you're talking about more career work from another actress. So this is one of Patricia Arquette's better roles.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, and
she's great in everything.
Well, this is a part of a woman who has a drug problem, and her father is, well, I mean, he's dead, basically. His body is a husk holding on to life. The doctors refuse to let him go. And so does the family, as a matter of fact. I think in a lot of movies, this ends up being a really flat character without a lot of dimension to it. Like, just someone who's there as someone to sort of save the protagonist or give him something to do. And this movie was written by Paul Schrader before I start talking about him. He wrote Taxi Driver as well. Has a long history of working with Scorsese. Fantastic storyteller. The way he reveals more about her character and tells us more about her is truly fascinating. And it gives a very talented actress like Patricia Arquette something to sink her teeth into. Because I think in '99, in that same year, she has to wade through crap like Stigmata. She's in some really lousy films. Or, even fare from higher tier directors that isn't very good, like Lost Highway, which is around the same era, maybe a couple years earlier. But it's just fantastic work from her, and it's so weird. I forget how talented she is. There's like this gulf of great performances from this all the way to like Boyhood, right?
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily her fault. It just lets you know what kind of roles are really out there, for women. I think she spent a lot of time on TV playing the medium in that show, and nobody even remembers that. She's such a great actress. I feel bad she didn't get more high quality work in the late '90s and early '00s.
Well, she's not typical Hollywood look to her.
I think she is. I always thought so.
Well, yeah, but she isn't. I can tell you, and that's probably why she didn't get a whole lot of roles, especially back then. Well, now she would, but
yeah. Well, she's incredibly talented, and she's one of the many aspects of the film that helps raise us above what the kind of standard fare that you might get. Because a story like this could be a mess, but with Paul Schrader's adapting the book, and Scorsese at the helm, like this is like a symphony being conducted perfectly. What you think is, disorder or chaos is not that at all. The movie is able to jump back and forth between so many different genres, because to some extent we haven't really recapped the movie, because the recap of the movie is a paramedic in the worst 3 days of his career.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, yes, this movie
go on various calls.
The movie is not plotless. It's not, but it doesn't have what I'd call like a strong narrative throughout.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, this is more about his adventures and him dealing with his situations. What is interesting about this is that, we meet reoccurring characters over and over again. And the more we learn about them, the more we see the world, and we see like the sorrow and the grayness that Frank, Nicolas Cage's character, has to see as well. I think one of my favorite characters is our junkie who can't stop drinking water. And he's played by the singer Mark Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you completely unrecognizable.
Nope.
Yeah, completely unrecognizable. It wasn't until, and I never realized until this viewing when I went to look up the cast list after the movie and realized that was him. And I was like, holy shit, I never would have thought he was capable of that kind of performance, because I think I've only seen him in that and like The Dad and Man on Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, of nothing parts. So I never considered him an actor in any way, shape, or form. And he's fantastic here. He really is. He's a character whose situation, goes down and down. He's just got mental illness.
Yeah,
and that's it. He's got mental illness, and no one will treat him for that.
No.
Yeah, nobody cares.
No, they lock
Patricia
him
Arquette
up.
does, because she knew him from beforehand.
Yeah.
But it lets you know the kind of relationship these people can have. He has a great sequence when they're in the ambulance and they picked up Michael K. Williams. He's been shot and he is dying, clearly. And Mark Anthony's character is so upset that he's dying because he's the one that's been begging and praying for death in some way, shape, or form. And he has a great interaction. It's like, he looks at Michael K. Williams, Nicolas Cage does, and goes, "You're not going to die, but don't worry, you are." When he looks over at Mark Anthony, it's this running gag that keeps going on. It's a weird movie it's such a dark film to have these kind of running jokes in it, but there's these nice moments of levity.
Yeah,
because that's how
comedy.
That's how real life is. You have gallows humor while you're in the middle of some really nasty shit sometimes. It's just how life is. And it's something that, Scorsese and Schrader can just grab effortlessly. And it's one of the things that really makes the movie stand out. Like you're aware of it. You're aware from the high quality of the movie, like as the opening shots are going down, because Scorsese is working like a madman. If you've ever seen the intro to Taxi Driver, he finds the scariest ways and the most intimidating ways to shoot a taxi.
Mm-hmm.
And he does a very similar thing at the start of this movie, where he finds like demonic angles and ways to make like the ambulance look so imposing, and almost shots to make it look like a prison. You have such a small confined space, and they have so many creative angles in it that I'm just amazed by. And the editing is so insane as well. Like sometimes they'll just break 180 for no particular reason, but it leads to the madness of the night. And then one of my favorite aspects in the cinematography is this kind of halo lighting from above, where characters are overexposed from an upper source.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the way that looks in the New York night. Because this is New York, filmed in 1998. So it has the feel of a pre-Giuliani New York City.
Yeah, it does.
And it really does. Like, you feel that dirt and that grime that's there, but the life that's in the city, eventually New York would become so sick of that situation, they would turn to the cruelest man they've ever let be, the mayor of New York City, and he waged his war on junkies and the homeless and shooed them away out of sight, out of mind. And this movie reminds you that those are real people. Like, they can be saved. They might not be, but anybody like that just needs
a little something.
Yeah, they need a hand out there. They need somebody as troubled as he is, as much sorrow as he carries. They need somebody like Frank to save them at that last possible, the darkest moment. He's the only person that can do that job.
And he cares.
He does, and that's what's killing him and tearing him apart.
Yeah.
He can't stop seeing her, the ghost.
Yeah.
She shows up and pops up randomly throughout the movie. And I think near the end of the film, there's a great shot where Patricia Arquette's character, it makes me wish I knew character names more. I only know them when they're named Kano and Sonia.
I know Rose is the...
Yeah, that's it. So he sees her late, and then she transforms to the ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice is still delivered from Patricia Arquette's voice. And it's one of those things, I mean, it's how we end the movie, basically. And it's such a poignant shot, when he's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, it's not your fault. And it's like, you carry that sorrow. We didn't ask you to do that. You don't have to. But it's just who he is. He has no other way to do it. We watched The Simpsons the other day, and they did a great bit where Bart pissed off Marge, and Lisa talks to him and is like, listen, Mom is not like the way I am or you are. Her heart's not going to wipe clean. It's going to absorb everything like this dirty bathroom rug. And that's kind of how Nic Cage is. He can't help but absorb all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally tearing him apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, emotionally and physically. I mean, the level of bags under his eyes, you would almost think he's a zombie by the final frame.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
It's a quasi-zombie movie in a way.
He looks worse and worse as the film goes along.
Almost to a ridiculous degree, but he really does.
Like he's going through withdrawals and everything.
Yeah, he's clearly, getting minutes of sleep a day, that as much as, when his body might nod off in pure exhaustion and then hopping right back into the fray again. He can't sleep without the nightmares of who's lost, who's died under his care. It really is amazing that what he's able to work in a more subtle performance. And it makes me wish Nic Cage did more subtle work more, because he's good at both. He's good at going over the top and going crazy and running down the streets of New York going, I'm a vampire, I'm a vampire, I'm a vampire, as well as, just giving a glance of heartbreak, when he sees Michael K. Williams' character die.
Yeah.
Just one look, and Nic Cage can do so much. You can see why Scorsese said he saw his eyes when he read about the weariness of that character. And Nic Cage is amazing here. And it's incredible to think nobody talks about it and there were no Oscar nods.
Yeah, Scorsese and Cage rode along with the real New York City paramedics and to prep for this film.
And, that's a notable thing, too, because Nicolas Cage is not a method guy. He's like, I'll figure it out when I get there. That's always been his style. Now, I don't know if that's, hey, I'm working with Scorsese. Let's up the game a little bit. Or I think maybe he just read this part and was like, I need to get more inside the head of a paramedic.
Yeah, maybe he didn't understand what they go through. Yeah, and wanted to.
And either way, whatever he did, I think turned out great. I mean, it's one of his finest performances, and it is a Scorsese film that's in my top 5, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not leaving anything out. I mean, I'm going to call Will later. We're going to have a big debate about where this ranks in his pantheon. Because I know this is one that he doesn't take very seriously, but it's a great movie. It's a great American movie.
I enjoyed it. It's the first time I ever saw it.
And it's from an era that we're never going to get back again, that late 90s, celluloid, the dirty and griminess of New York, pre 9/11. Everything about that is completely lost to time. And this movie is a perfect time capsule of what that era was like for filmmaking. And it's a weird period piece. It's a strange movie. It's a period piece for 8 years earlier? Yeah, because it's supposed to take place in the early 90s and it was shot in 98. So you're not too far off, but that's sort of a weird thing. Most period pieces at least go 20 years in the past.
Yeah, I mentioned that Scorsese and Cage rode along with the New York City paramedics. Before writing the script, Paul Schrader went along on several ambulance rides.
Now that I believe. Paul Schrader is the kind of guy who throws himself into his work. So
His first night he rode, he had a contend with a grizzly site.
Yeah.
It was a homeless man who was cut in half by a subway.
That's the job.
Yeah.
That's the job. Yeah. I know, like on Reddit, when they talk about like what's the most disturbing thing you've ever seen, they almost had to say excluding paramedics and stuff like that. Because paramedics, they're the guys who get there and they see, the charred bodies, the bodies cut in half, people barely clinging to life when they should be dead. They see some truly horrible things. And this movie does a great job showing who some of those people can be and the toll that it takes on them. All those guys, they're finding a way to deal with the toll that it takes on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tom Sizemore is a crazy person.
Crazy.
But that's how he copes.
His character was nuts.
I know. You're just scared with it because you don't know what's going to happen from one frame to the next.
He almost kills Nicolas Cage.
He does. Yeah, he does. And that's the thing. It's not even the only accident in the movie. They laugh at accident off at one point. That's how insane these guys are. And the kind of stress and toll that this work really puts on them.
Yeah.
And this movie does a great job explaining that and getting to that.
Do you think the relationship between Patricia Arquette and Frank is one of love, or is it just mutual understanding?
Mutual understanding.
Yeah, I don't think this is a love story.
No, it's not a love story. This is just two humans connecting. Whether their genitals will connect at some point is up in the air. I mean, it's always a possibility, but it's not a love story in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it's about the love the two humans can share when they're both in pain. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing romantic about it, though.
Do you think the narration adds to this movie or takes away from it?
It's used sparingly.
It is.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate because I am not a fan of narration.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to actually take the time to show you the Blade Runner theatrical cut where you'll be shocked by the amount of narration in it.
Oh my God.
Because you would think it just has a couple, but there's quite a bit of narration. I was surprised when I went back and watched it like 5 years ago. I was like, oh my God, this did have a lot of narration in it. So it is used sparingly. You have to be real careful about how you use narration. I can remember my old screenwriting professor throwing things at me. Don't give away plot details or don't reveal plot details in the narration. So you have to be careful about what you do in your narration.
Yeah,
there's
can
rules
be done
to it
bad.
and stuff like that. Rules are made to be broken, but it can be a difficult thing. But Nic Cage is pretty effortless here.
Why do you think he has so much guilt for that girl, Rose, that died? I mean, she's in the whole movie, and it's like he only chose her for some reason. I'm sure he's seen several people die. He sees one person die in the whole course of the weekend.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing about that death is he made a mistake. Sometimes people get there and there's nothing you can do. Like you can just try to save them and make them comfortable, but they're going to die.
Yeah, because the scene of her death is very, I don't want to say by the numbers.
Yeah.
But it feels that way.
It does. And all he's trying to do is get the intubate her. And he fails over and over and over again until she expires. And that is what hangs with him. Is that something he's done 100,000 times over and over again. He couldn't do, and it got this girl killed. Like that's a death that he really feel the blood. He can feel the blood on his hands every time he looks down, even though it's just a mistake. He was overworked. He was tired. He screwed up. I mean, he could probably barely hold his hands straight. I mean, yeah, he could have been drinking, but still, it was just a mistake. But he can't live with it. And I think that's what haunts him more so than anything else. Like he'll take there's nothing you can do about chance. If you go there and some guy's half burnt, he's gonna expire. There's nothing you can do. But he could have saved that girl if he'd have just gotten things right. Didn't. He never can.
He kept getting into her stomach.
Yeah.
I just love this movie. This was a good movie.
Yeah, it really is.
Good choice.
Yeah.
For Nicolas Cage. Frank goes and kills the old man. He watches him die.
Yeah.
Why do you think he decided to do that? I know he's trying to give Patricia Arquette's family a little piece, make a decision for them that they couldn't make on their own, the right decision.
Yeah.
But still, why do you think that happened?
I mean, just that entirely. Like he feels sympathy for the man. Like there's that great scene earlier where the doctors are matter-of-factly just keeping him alive.
Yeah.
Like it's just something they got to do. Like just get him with that. He'll come back. He always does.
17 times.
17 times.
He coded or something like that.
His body was begging to die.
Yeah.
Begging to die, and they wouldn't let him. And, you can read that in a lot of ways, but of all the crazy things that he does, that might be the least crazy He was suffering. He was ready to go. It was over. And
Wait,
so
he took it upon himself to make that decision.
yes, he did. Yes, he did. Because everyone else was making the wrong decision in his eyes. Because he can, there's a line early in the film where he says, something takes over my hands and they do more than I could ever do as a man, when he talks about trying to save people. And I think that's just something that a paramedic can do when they've been in the field long enough. Like, he can see into that guy's eyes and he knows, like, the suffering that's there.
Yeah, he envisions him talking.
Yeah, I think there's that nice sequence where he's like, no, please don't. But it's not even like a pleading sort of tone. Like, the guy's very matter of fact about how it's said in his head. And, the actor does a fantastic job with his eyes, looking right into the camera to convey what that narration is telling you. Like, he's putting the emotion on it that's not in the voice. And I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because that means something, because that's all Nic Cage is seeing. That voice is just there as a translation for the audience. So Scorsese doesn't have to put subtitles. But I think we all could have figured it out. But he wants to be sure that we know what's going on inside of Frank's head at that moment in time. And that's what sets him up to do that, because he has gone through the entire film thinking that's the right way to do it. There's a bunch of times he even talks to Rose, right? To Rose, and mentions that her father's at the end, like prepping her, getting her ready, while he says, are you okay? And stuff like that. He always has a way of making sure to note to her that her father is already dead.
Yeah.
Much like Nic Cage, he too is a zombie, just can't die. It's
yeah. Nicolas Cage can't get away from this job.
No, it's one of the movie's better running jokes when he's just like, you said if I came in late, I'd be fired. I'm an hour late. Fire me. I need you, baby. I need you.
I'll fire you tomorrow, I promise.
Yeah, I'll fire you tomorrow, I promise. You come in tomorrow, fire you first thing. And that's the thing. You don't leave this job. No. You can't. Nobody wants to do it. It's awful. It looks terrible. So I can certainly understand that.
Well, is there anything else that you want to add about this movie before we move on to the reviews?
I mean, I could talk about it for another hour if we're going to be perfectly honest. And, it's one of the movies that truly deserves it. But I think we can move on. I'm giving both films today very strong recommends.
Yeah.
Bringing Out the Dead is probably one of the strongest recommends I can give you, because it is highly underrated.
I saw it for the first time, folks, and I enjoyed it greatly.
Yeah, I really recommend you guys stop whatever you do and check it out. It's on HBO Max. I don't know how long it's going to be there. If not, find whatever nefarious means you can to watch this film, because it really is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Face Off got a 4.3 for user review, 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, 7.3 on IMDb. Bringing Out the Dead got a 3.3 user review, 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 6.8 on IMDb. So most people liked Face Off before they liked Bringing Out the Dead. But a lot of people had problems with this being a Scorsese movie. They didn't feel like it was a Scorsese. At least when I was reading the reviews. Yeah.
As I said, this film got nice reviews at the time, but just never really caught on in any way, shape, or form. It just, like I said, nobody really talked about it at all, coming to the end of the year for Oscars in 99.
I rank this movie as one of the most awful things I've ever seen. Not only is it totally unbelievable, but the situations are so unpleasant, so cloying, so awful that it's more like a nightmare than just won't end. And when I say won't end, I mean it. This movie drags on the way past the comfort level. It keeps going from one improbable situation to another, linked by flashy chase scenes until you're begging for some kind of resolution. The acting of Nic Cage and John Travolta are just about what you would expect. That is to say, totally over the top. Chewing on the scenery is a polite term for what they do. As for the talents of John Woo, well, I've heard all about his voices as opera, philosophy of filmmaking, but I just don't buy it. Every movie I've seen of him isn't scary or exciting or shocking. It's uncomfortable, like sitting on a sharp spike. I saw this movie years ago in the theater, but it still sticks with me. I guess that should say something about its power, but years ago I saw a dead deer sitting by the side of the road. It was rotting in the heat. Its muscles had contracted. It smelled awful, and it looked like a mummy. That experience stuck with me too. Seeing Face Off was like seeing that deer. Unpleasant, nauseating, and unnecessary.
For the first 30 seconds of that review, I didn't know which movie you were talking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he's like, it's movies like a nightmare. It's unrealistic. We go from a chase to chase. And I'm like, this could be either film.
Well, I guess that'll be good for the audience as well.
Yeah. No, it's Well, that guy really didn't like Face Off.
No.
I can't. I mean, I can disagree with some points that he has, but man, that homeboy did not dig that movie at all. To get the dead deer reference is pretty tough. I'm going to reference that dead deer and stuff that we do in the future. So that's I like that little.
I did too.
I like
That's
that
why I
slam
wanted
on the
to read
movie.
it.
That's a hell of a slam.
Now, Bringing Out the Dead, a 1-star review. Having watched the trailer of Bringing Out the Dead, I looked forward to some kind of redemptive, redeeming filmmaking. It wasn't there. I've never been more disappointed in film as I went in with high expectations. If I wanted Anthology of Grief from Nic Cage, I could write him a letter asking him how he felt. The film had some good parts, but they were too few and far in between.
You do that for any movie.
There was no credible storyline. As a dark genre, the movie failed and was lost in the flickering lights of illogic. I had the poor sense of remaining throughout the length of the film, and I wished I would have gotten up the numerous times I felt I should have. Just about ready to leave, Ving Rhames made me sit back down. I was never more disappointed in a film as it never seemed to go anywhere and left you feeling you shouldn't go anywhere either.
I can certainly understand people having issues with the kind of movie that it is because it can be pretty intense and very dark.
Yeah.
It sounds like he wasn't really ready for a movie to be that dark and serious.
No.
Yeah, and listen, if you're not in the mood for this kind of flick, like you just don't go and say on a happy Saturday, say, hey, let's watch Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
It's not what you do. Like it's just not done. And the same thing with this movie. This movie isn't quite as dark as that.
No.
But it still deals with a high level of darkness. So if you're not ready for what this movie is going to bring at you, then you're probably going to have a pretty bad time watching it.
It's a dark comedy.
Yeah. Like I said, there are some light moments in it. But like I said, this movie will, it'll hit you hard emotionally. That's what Scorsese is setting out to do. And he will do it. With Nic Cage's eyes, it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah. Well, everybody, if you want to come leave us some comments, you can go to grittyrebootcast@gmail.com and let us know how you feel about the podcast or anything else you want to say. We take criticism too. If you want to criticize what we do, that's good. We're good with that.
That's right. Yeah, you can let us know that there, or you can find us at Gritty Reboot at Instagram and TikTok as well. As long as TikTok remains unbanned,
yeah,
we'll stay there until then. So, but by all means, reach out and let us know something. Give us a request for a movie to do, or just say hello.
All right. See ya, guys.